So dark. It was so hard to wake up this morning.
Well, look, we have a couple of people in Manchester as well. They can feel our pain of the dark weather. At least it's not raining though.
For now.
Yeah, I probably just jinxed everyone. Sorry.
All good. Do we want to just wait another minute for people to start jumping on? We can get started.
Perfect. Yes, we will send out the recording afterwards.
Yes.
I've got to say, so I think some of you guys know I've been teaching business, a couple of business courses at one of our local colleges here at Conestoga. And this webinar is starting, or this panel is starting off like pretty much exactly like my classes start off, where I'm kind of sitting there and it's like, okay, we'll just give people like 5 minutes to jump on and then we're going. And then people can catch up afterwards.
Awesome. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. We are recording this, so we'll make sure that everyone gets it in the follow-up. But thank you everyone for joining today. If you have any experience in technology sales, you've probably realized by now that not all deals are created equal. Software in particular has a lot of unique challenges. So we know that your sales approach can't be a one size fits all. Sales into either the European or US markets require an understanding of the differences in the markets and making sure that your sales team is equipped for maximum success. So today we are joined by some of the best sales professionals that I know to give you the confidence to sell within different areas. So we'll start off with some introductions. If everyone could introduce themselves, their company and their role, where they're based and who you're typically selling into. Josh, we'll start with you.
Yeah, my name is Josh Kirkham. I manage the sales team here at Vidyard. I'm based in Toronto, Canada, or just outside of that. And I have predominantly sold to the North American market, but have dabbled a little bit in the European or EMEA markets before the European team was grown out here at Vidyard.
Awesome. Ravi?
Yeah, my name is Ravi Prasad. I work as the systems architect over here at Six and Flow. I spend a lot of time kind of selling into both sides of the pond. My background is in selling into North America, Canada, and the USA, but particularly doing a lot, and especially nowadays with Six and Flow, over in the UK and in EMEA as well, particularly around the pre-sales side of things, scoping things out, technical integrations, just making sure people are happy with the solutions before we actually move forward as well. So there's a lot of experience and a lot of calls across different time zones on both sides of it.
Great. Charlotte?
Hey, so I am Charlotte. Nice to meet you all. I am based in Manchester in the UK, which I just mentioned is not the nicest of weathers at the moment. And I am with Six and Flow. So we're a growth marketing agency and I'm our growth director. So I predominantly sell within EMEA, UK markets, but then over the last 12, 18 months, we're starting to grow our North American presence and selling kind of outside of that EMEA region as well. So this has been a topic of conversation that we've definitely been focused on around changing our approach and making sure that we understand each of the markets that we're selling into as well.
Awesome. Last but not least, Talita.
Hi, everyone. I'm Talita. I'm in the UK. I'm based in Bournemouth in Dorset, hence the sun, which has now gone because of Charlotte. I'm with Vidyard. I'm an account executive based here in EMEA, typically selling into EMEA. I did have the chance to tap into the North America market a little bit as we were still sort of joined when I first joined Vidyard, but now mostly focusing EMEA, and that means every single country in Europe, but yeah, Middle East and Africa as well, but mostly in Europe. So important to bear in mind that even within this single continent, we do have a lot of cultures and a lot of differences to go about. So hopefully we can talk a little bit about that today as well.
Awesome. So now we want to know where all of you are from. We got a little taste in the beginning of the panel, but we are going to throw up a poll on your screen. And if you just want to fill out where you're from, we'd love to see.
While we're waiting for that as well, there was one question from the chat really quickly from Eric. Can you define EMEA? Maybe this is a good one for Vidyard, how you guys kind of think about EMEA, how you guys kind of do the territories.
Yeah, so we basically break it up so that the territory-wise right now, we have a North American team, and that's mainly Canada and the United States. We have an EMEA team, which, as Selena mentioned, is basically Europe, United Nations and Africa, I think, if that's correct, as well there, Talita. And we have also started breaking it out into APAC, which is mainly broken down into Australia as we're going right now, but quickly expanding.
So EMEA, I mean, it kind of in the definition, but we're talking about Europe, the UK, and then of course extending down into Africa as well, South Africa, and then anything on the continent necessarily.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. Absolutely. Very cool. And it looks like the split, we just got our poll results in as well. It looks like we got a very interesting split, actually. 2/3 to EMEA, 1/3 to North America.
Interesting.
Nobody
All
from the
right.
rest of the world. So the only people here with a stake in this are people from Europe or from North America.
Awesome. So to start off, I want to hear about everyone's kind of biggest challenge that they've experienced in their sales career so far. So Josh, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge or biggest learning curve that I had was actually when I first got into leadership, which was right when everyone went digital first. So I know when I first got onboarded as an account executive at Vidyard, it was in office. And I know a huge part of learning is also hearing how other people are speaking too. So a big learning curve on my end was when I first stepped into a leadership role and I was onboarding 10 new account executives. It was all remote. So trying to make sure they're still getting all the experiences they need to ramp at an effective rate and making sure that they're still fully being supported in a dispersed workforce was a good learning curve on my end as well. But it's been working really well, and we're still hiring, we're still going, and people are still liking the experience that they're having. So it's been a cool experience, but that's probably the most difficult one that I've had.
Awesome. Talita, do you want to share yours?
Apart from not hitting quota, what else is there?
That's
Which
the biggest one, isn't it?
thankfully doesn't happen often, but I don't wanna go into that because everyone knows it's a pain when you don't hit your numbers. But I think in line with what Josh said a little bit, it was just getting used to being 100% at home and not going to an office and just adapting to doing everything behind the screen. I was just telling these guys just before everyone joined that I had participated at a first in-person event just last Friday, which was crazy, to see everyone face to face again. So for me, the biggest challenge was definitely just to move my whole life to being at home. And how can you keep yourself motivated as you're like spending so much time behind the screen. So yeah, not a surprise. I guess a lot of people can relate.
Yeah, no, 100%. I completely agree with Talita and Josh on kind of that point around one of the biggest challenges definitely has been, we were always digital first as an agency, but within sales, it's picking up people's kind of sales pitches and what they're saying and being able to get off a call and kind of have that closed loop of feedback of people around you, and being able to kind of all share in that piece as well. And then just to add that, I'd say my other biggest challenge in kind of sales so far has been as I've progressed roles and then moving from kind of sales focused and numbers focused and closing focused to that educational piece and starting to kind of have that transition of actually understanding what is the pain point that prospects have got, what is it that I can actually help with, and where can I support, what does that look like, rather than, I think when I first started out in sales, it was always kind of, how many calls have I made, how many emails have I sent, how many deals have I closed, and very kind of stat focused. But having that kind of thought leader kind of educational transition has definitely been kind of a challenge, but one it's been great to kind of learn as well as I've gone along.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I think compared to you guys, my answer is going to be a little lackluster, but I would say for me, it was actually the hardest part. There's kind of two parts to it. One was just getting started. I had come in from a sales background, like a retail sales background, but cold calling, picking up the phone, doing research, doing social media, all that kind of stuff. It's a lot more pressure, and there's a lot more riding on it, and there's a lot more of a skill set you have to develop in order to do it properly. I mean, anybody can send out templates and things like that, and we've seen the horror stories with like, hey, first name. I think we're all guilty, myself included, of like sending this out by accident as well. So it's a lot of that learning curve, and especially just building the confidence especially here in North America, building the confidence to be able to like pick up the phone, strike up a conversation with somebody who doesn't know you, doesn't know your product, and ultimately, get them warm enough to want to engage with you, to want to, evaluate your product and things like that. So I was very guilty of like paralysis by analysis, like either doing too much research or not knowing what I needed to do, not feeling comfortable enough with the scripts and all that kind of stuff. And that did take me a while to like get into my comfort zone and really get into the groove. I would say the other part to it too is just kind of figuring out where you want to go in your sales career, because there's the individual contributor, there's the manager, and then you don't necessarily have to be in sales. You can go into customer success, you can go into marketing. There's a lot of options in where to go. I ended up in partnerships pretty soon after my sales and business development stint. But again, it's not like a typical path. And I think a lot of people in sales, especially sales development, business development, are always looking and always considering like, what do I want to do next? And figuring that out is for me, it was a big challenge. And I'm sure some other people feel the same way too.
Yeah, and I think everyone kind of touched on two things where I've seen the biggest shift in sales. One is moving to a remote first type of environment, but also the changes in social selling. Like Charlotte, you touched on that, right? It's no longer just about doing the hard sale. It's about educating and building your personal brand and your company's brand. And so we're going to talk about some tips and tricks and tools to kind of help with that today. But I do think those are two important themes that I just wanted to call out. And I'm sure other people listening right now have experienced those shifts as well. So when you're thinking about your buyers, what are your buyers' expectations of sales today? Like with the changes in moving remote and social selling, from your experience, or maybe your team's experience, like what have you noticed? Maybe any shifts or trends, or just the overall expectations that you've noticed?
I think especially on the North American side, and this is something that I know at Vidyard, especially in our teams, that we've always really been conscious of. Is the individuals we are talking to, VP, C-level executives, have the most insane calendars that you could ever even think to comprehend. So I know one of the biggest things that we've always been really focused on is being very considerate of their time. One of the big pillars in our kind of sales process is giving them all the information they need the most efficient way possible, so they can make a very informed decision quickly. Because especially when you're taking in their salaries, their expectations, the cost of the business for prolonging some of this stuff. And again, Vidyard is a very cool tool, but it's not incredibly complicated in what it really does. So it's very easy to be efficient with our buyers' times. So I think the biggest thing from a buyer's expectation standpoint is being able to be very efficient with the time that you're spending with them. And being able to give them all that information so they can quickly make a decision if this could make sense for their team or not. And the biggest recent shift that we've been really seeing is looking at not why they should leverage something like video or Vidyard, but it's how can they actually leverage Vidyard or video. And I think we've seen a big shift in our talk tracks and how we're trying to explain the solution. So it's not like this is how you record a video, but this is how, Charlotte, your team specifically should use this within your sequences in HubSpot. So I think that's been a big mindset shift as we have become all dispersed. And we've been seeing a lot more of a shift to an inside sales motion too.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think that on top of that as well, I feel that a lot of kind of buyers that I'm seeing at the moment appreciate the research that we do into their sector, their industry, and kind of them ahead of those calls as well, because it's definitely seen a shift more, as I said at the start, kind of into that consultative sell as well. So looking at kind of understanding them, their needs, rather than trying to have that one size fits all as well. And majority of kind of people I speak to, especially in EMEA, they don't like salespeople. Salespeople aren't on the top list of people that you want to speak to, because they feel like they're just going to get sold to and sold at. So it's building that trust and kind of being seen as that trusted advisor of somebody that is taking the interest into who they are, what their challenges are, where they want to get to, why they want to get there, and then being able to use that consultativeness to say, actually, okay, based off what you've just said, this is actually what's going to be the right fit for you, rather than going straight into selling straight away and kind of missing that relationship building and kind of understanding piece as well.
To build off that point too, one thing I think I've seen become very powerful, and it's always been something that's powerful, but just like word of mouth, referrals, getting referred in. I think more and more these days that's becoming like such a big way to get social proof and to do all the things you said, Charlotte, to show that we understand, to show that we've done our research, and ultimately just to have somebody saying like, hey, these guys are good, like I've used them, they're, they have a great process, whatever that is, they have a great product. I'm finding that those referrals are gold, more so nowadays than before. And I think the reason is because people are just tired of evaluations. People are tired of sitting on Zooms. People, just like you guys have said, like my calendar is full up today. I can look at Charlotte's calendar for the week. It's booked up. Josh, Talita, I'm sure you guys are all the same. And the prospects that we're talking to, VPs, C-levels, directors, even more so than us, right? And so having somebody trustworthy who says, hey, I know this vendor, I know this person, they do a great job. That takes a lot of pressure and a lot of kind of the uncertainty in engaging with a new vendor or something, or engaging with a salesperson away, because you have somebody who can vouch for them and somebody who can say, yes, we've had a good experience. This is awesome. So I find that's been helping a lot in the conversations we've been having recently over at Six and Flow.
Just to add into kind of Ravi's piece on trust as well, I think it kind of loops back into that honesty and trust piece of being able to push back and say, actually, this isn't the right solution for you. This probably isn't the right path. I think that sales, you're often kind of pushed to close and to sell, because that's kind of what you're there to do. But I always say that kind of at Six and Flow, it's as important to qualify somebody out as it is to qualify somebody in that process as well.
I think like overall, from like everything you guys said, I 100% agree. And I'm speaking to people every day as well. It's more about us as salespeople, just making sure that we're adding value every time that we speak to that customer. And at Vidyard, we're really lucky with video. It's so much easier to add value when you have a chance to send a video over rather than just like a bunch of words or a long message. But yeah, as long as you have in mind that every time you're going to speak to someone, you're going to add value to them and not yourself, then you're gold, right? Because that pretty much covers your expectations.
I think that's a really important point too, Talita. I know we've probably got to move on to some of the other questions we've got, but there's the thinking around enabling your champion, right? When we're having a sales conversation, you want to give them all the information they need. You want to help them with their due diligence. You want to help them present internally. And video is such a perfect way to like communicate that information to multiple stakeholders, or just to give people the information they need so they can pass it on. And then the same thing with referrals too, like rather than, just taking it a step further, enabling your champion, right? Rather than just saying, hey, can you like make an introduction? You can record a quick video, which, we've done, maybe a quick demo, introducing yourself, introducing your company, and just giving some background as well, which you can pass along or have your person pass along as a referral. And again, that's just much easier to open up doors, to book meetings, to things like that as well.
Yeah, I love that, everything that you guys pointed out. And so kind of filtering into the next question, how are you actually selling in North America versus Europe? Like what channels and tools are you using? Do you notice that maybe social selling is bigger in one or the other, or any differences between the two? Would love to hear some opinions on that.
I know from my sales experience, but even teaching a lot of the newer sales members at Vidyard, I've always personally found that the biggest channels that we've used are email with the addition of video to that, obviously, and then cold calling. We're definitely the biggest channels for us. I know there have been some people, like I know Jenna Scapinella, who oversees our SDR team now. Back in her business development days or her account executive days, she was an absolute weapon when it came to social. And I definitely know it's a channel like LinkedIn, where if you actually put the time in and you do it properly, you can see some huge results. But I do know there is a bit of that faux pas where it's like, is this a social part or is this a business channel too? So obviously it's just trying to find that correct channel for the individual you're trying to reach out to, and just trying to find which is the proper medium to communicate them with. But I know personally, I've always been a huge fan of email and in the phone, just keeping it very simple and very generic from that standpoint. But Talita, I know obviously with you being on the same team, but in a different region, how would you say that you leverage a lot of it? Because you're a pretty big weapon when it comes to prospecting on a weekly basis.
Yeah, so I don't call at all, never have. And I don't think I plan to unless like I really, really have to. So like more late stages, but prospecting, I don't call. And that goes in line with, I guess, the region that we're working. I work a lot with Scandinavian markets, obviously UK, but also like Northern Europe, Germany. First of all, there's like the whole GDPR thing, right? Like you can't always just call people. And second, like Europeans are less in general receptive to getting a random person calling them than like a video or an email. So I don't like calling people because I don't like people calling me randomly. I just do not pick up the phone ever. So for me, like the best channels would be number one, video. And then that's the meaning of communication, right? So like video, if it's LinkedIn message or Sales Navigator or an email, but video always. And then, yeah, just like engaging with them on social. So I'm a big stalker. So I'll like posts, or I'll just, put a comment on like a funding post or anything that's happening with that company or person, just to be in touch. Because I know when they're ready to have a conversation with me, I'm going to be top of mind. And that's what I focus on, rather than trying to get them to like have a conversation right away.
I completely agree with the calling piece as well. So kind of within EMEA as well, there's so many different languages that fall under that kind of umbrella as well, that when you are calling without having kind of knowledge of who you're going to get through, there is always that risk that it's not going to be English, and then you're in a conversation of trying to get through a gatekeeper in another language and trying to explain what you're doing there, that just waste time more than anything. So I'm a lot more focused, really similar to you, Talita, around kind of video. I see video in EMEA working exceptionally well at the moment because we're slightly behind that curve. It feels like US is kind of ahead of that, where there's a lot more video that's being used, so it's more kind of accepted to be able to do it. Whereas in EMEA, it's exciting and it's still at that kind of growth piece. But then also, one of I was listening to another webinar the other day, and they were talking around texting as part of a sales process. And I don't know if it's just kind of the English in me. If somebody was to text me as part of a sales process, it would really creep me out, and I wouldn't want to speak to them. I've got about 300 unread texts though on my phone, so I just don't respond to any sort of text messages. It's definitely more around kind of, for me, email, LinkedIn, and that social selling piece. The other thing I've seen, especially in EMEA, is keeping those emails really short and sweet and asking questions. None of the long kind of spiel of, we work in this sector, we work with these markets, we've seen X, Y, Z, before you've actually had a conversation. A lot more focus of, I've seen you've done this, have you thought about trying this? And keeping it a lot more conversational.
It's very interesting, especially around the text messages point. I know if it was a very top of funnel standpoint and somebody's trying to catch my attention texting me, I'd be the same way, where I was like, hey, I don't know if I know you, I'm not sure if I'm into that. But I definitely think later in sales cycles, it's something that we honestly use a lot as a best practice on the North American side, to keep that quick alignment with your champion. Because with, like Ravi said, their calendars being so slammed, a lot of times it's easier to answer a quick text than it is to try to get on the phone at all times to talk about things as you're working towards a month end, quarter end, things like that. But I think it definitely just depends on what area of that funnel that you're really focusing on. But Charlotte, would you say that any stage in the funnel for you, texting is kind of off limits from your standpoint?
Yeah, I think for me, I would be like, oh, and then I'd feel like you get like red reports and stuff on your text, don't you? And I don't know, I would feel like I'm always attached to that person and that there's no getting out of them. But that might just, again, that's probably a kind of a real difference potentially between EMEA and North America, and North America being slightly ahead of that kind of curve of trialing, testing, and kind of pushing some of those boundaries as well.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, sorry, I was just going to say something about this.
That's okay. I was just gonna say, to build off of that, what are some of the differences in work culture and expectations that you four have noticed? So, when it comes to vacation or like that work-life balance, maybe what are some trends that you've seen for the different places?
So sitting in coming from a North American perspective, you say vacation, and I get slightly triggered when I think about trying to sell into the UK or selling into EMEA, calling back in the day. It's one of those things. It's around August, maybe around September and around December, people just disappear off the face of the earth, taking annual leave, going on vacations and stuff. And it's all really good things. But there's like a huge contrast that you notice, me being in North America, and I'll always speak for myself here, but I think people in North America just tend to work longer hours. Like, we tend to work harder. Well, not harder necessarily, not more productively necessarily, but we do tend to work more. We tend to work more, where people in Europe tend to get a lot more vacation, right? And again, we see this in August and stuff. And so I've been in this situation myself. I've talked to a bunch of people, Josh included, and a few people as well, who have like woken up early to call into EMEA from Canada, for example, and then not been able to get a hold of anybody. And I remember one guy who's a good friend of mine who was trying to make his mark at Vidyard by focusing on EMEA, right? So he would come in really early. He would just cold call into EMEA. He would do his socials. He would just try to build out EMEA as a channel. And he was freaking out in August because nobody was around. All the deals and stuff that he had to flip over, all pushed out just because everybody was just like, "Oh, sorry, I'm off on leave." Right? It's something I think it still happens today. And again, I'm pretty jealous of all the time and I'll call it a better work-life balance, right? Just being able to being culturally more accepted to have more time off, just generally speaking, and of course, people taking that time too. Makes it harder from a North American perspective if you're trying to expand, you're trying to fill in of like, as you say, as everybody says, and as everybody knows, like we have monthly, quarterly goals, and you really, really have to be cognizant of kind of those downtime periods because it kind of sweeps, as far as I see it, it kind of sweeps the continent, right? And people, again, totally rightfully tend to take time off in annual leave, which we don't particularly find as much in North America, from my perspective.
I think the whole thing around this is it's the norm. Like for us based in EMEA here, I've worked in the States and I know the different mentality, right? And it's just, again, so embedded in the culture. But for us is the norm. So, I mean, it's just what it is, right? Like it's August, you're not going to be working as much because no one else is. So like, who are you going to sell to? There's no one there. So it's just what it is. And like, it's more a matter of how do you, as a salesperson, plan your life around it and take time off when everyone else is taking time off versus take time off when people are buying, right? So be conscious of that. And then just be mindful that when you're reaching out, especially if you're in North America and selling into EMEA, just be mindful of that. Like don't expect an answer, or if they say, I'm going on vacation, just say, enjoy your vacation rather than, can we talk before you go kind of thing, because that's just not going to land well. And yeah, like it's just a matter of like getting used to the different countries and cultures. I know quite a few countries in Europe are testing the 4-day work week, for example. Maybe that's going to be the future. I think Scotland just started. I read in the news somewhere that they were sort of like trying. It was a Scandinavian thing, but now like I heard, I don't know if it's right, but that Scotland is trying it out too. So maybe that's going to be the norm for us. I hope one day that, we're all going to get like an extra day off. So we just have to be conscious of that and know that our leads and prospective customers, that's the pace that they're working on, and we just have to be respectful of like their time, which again, it goes back to like respecting their time.
I even think though, on the North American side, we've seen a big transition to stuff more like that, especially for the last few months, where I know, honestly, from May to August was probably the slowest summer that I've ever seen on the North American side. Because as things started opening up and people started to be able to go on trips and vacations, they took full advantage of it. So I know we even saw a much slower July than we typically do on the North American side, because a lot more people taking those vacations. And I absolutely agree, Talita. It's like, as you're having those conversations, no matter what that culture is, I think it's very important to understand what their personal timelines look like and what the other things need to happen. And honestly, just being more curious around what that sales process could look like. Just so you can align properly and set those appropriate next steps. So we're never being those annoying, pushy salespeople, because like Charlotte mentioned, nobody wants to deal with that. And they want to make sure that we're always working on their timeline, because we live in a buyer's market. We're not in a selling market anymore. So we have to make sure that we're completely on their page and on their timelines. Otherwise, you shot yourself in the foot and you could easily ruin a deal from that.
Yeah, no, 100%. I also think though that while I don't necessarily agree with you, Ravi, that you guys work harder, I do think that...
I didn't say it's more productive, but I did say I think the mentality is we do work.
I think that there is a more... I feel like in EMEA, if you're on holiday and you're on a beach or you've got a different backdrop that's not kind of your home, working from home or your office setup, you're less likely to jump on a Zoom call and to have that call. And whereas I do feel like North America and US markets, you're there's a bit more of a relaxed culture around where you are and kind of making that part of the conversation of like, I am on vacation, but I'm here to have the conversation, that I don't think is always understood as much in EMEA in certain regions.
And
But
I
that's
think,
the
no,
learning curve. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that's right, and that's the nuance we're looking for. It's really that mentality, Charlotte, that you pointed out. So yeah, that's exactly it. Just I think if we can restate it one more time, to be a little less shots fired, it would be Europeans are much better at kind of disconnecting. So when it's vacation, this is vacation mode, and I'm guilty of this myself. And again, I'll speak for myself. Like if I have vacation and like an urgent email or something comes in and I'm not doing anything, like I'm still looking at it, I'm still thinking about it, and I might even respond, right?
You're just remembering that the majority of people on here were from EMEA now, hey?
Yes, yeah.
He's remembering the poll results.
He's getting some interesting messages in LinkedIn right now. So,
so I know time is flying by, and we've got lots more questions and a bunch of questions from the audience. So 2 more questions from my side, and then we'll move into some of those from the Q&A. But if you could give some tips for Americans to work better with Europeans and vice versa, what would those quick tips be?
One quick tip that comes to mind, and especially just, if you're selling across the time zones, the asynchronous communications is like the biggest thing, right? Like you have such a small window to do meetings, to do phone calls and things like that where you align. It's basically 4 or 5 hours depending on daylight savings times, right? And so being able to communicate more asynchronously, video is such a huge part of this, communicating information as and when somebody wants to see it. So they have it in their inbox, they have it in their DMs and LinkedIn, whatever it might be, but they can choose when and how to engage. And with keeping the time zone differences in mind, it's such an important thing. You want to be able to make sure people can get the information as and when they need it. And one of the best ways to do that is with those asynchronous communications, rather than trying to force people to do things on your time. It's like we said, it's always on the buyer's time. And I think we see this on both sides of the pond.
Especially when you're looking to help champion sell, where if I'm dealing with Rabbi and I have to get a hold of Charlotte, that can be very tough, especially just from UK to Canada, that 5-hour time difference. So that only gives us 4 hours a day to try to speak. So it makes it very easy for you as a buyer to help arm your, or you as a seller, I should say, to help arm your champion with the information they need to help work in a more realistic time frame. So I definitely agree with the asynchronous thing. We even see that throughout North America, just with the 3-hour time differences you have from West Coast to East Coast. Make it very, very easy to help give your champion what they need to communicate your value and stop that game of broken telephone. Because like we all know, our solutions aren't the one thing they're looking at. It's probably one of 20 at a given time, whether that's hiring, how do we scale, how do we do X, Y, Z, what's the other technology we're looking at, building out next quarter's budget. So we need to make it as easy as we can for people, especially with those time zones. So I 100% agree with that, Rabbi.
I think Aaron makes a really good point as well on kind of the comments around having somebody on the ground in that region as well. That we've seen that we've been expanding into North America, kind of that US market, and having somebody that's on the ground and that is in that time zone, whether they are going to be the main point of contact for that whole process or just an additional one as part of that conversation, definitely helps. And it also goes back to kind of Josh, your point earlier around be respectful of people's time as well. If you know that you're having a call and it's there kind of 6 p.m, making sure that kind of it is a call that's going to add value, not just a case of, okay, I need to speak to them to get kind of next steps of this sale and process it. And
that's actually one of the biggest things, Charlotte, that we noticed and why Toledo is now working on the Vidyard team and many others. I know for the longest time, we tried to grow our EMEA presence purely with a North American team. And we had a lot of struggles with it, to be completely frank. And right when we actually started investing in EMEA by bringing on people who understand the culture, the language, or actually in the same time zone to make it really easy, it's definitely the biggest growth we've seen in EMEA by far ever at Vidyard. I think we've seen something like a 200% lift in EMEA revenue and almost a 300% lift in pipeline, simply because we have people who understand the culture, which is a huge part of it, and two, are just in the same time zone to speak with them. I know even from an inbound SDR perspective, because we kept that team very North American based for a while, having to wait 3 to 4 hours to schedule a meeting can be very frustrating when somebody wants to talk to somebody. So I know one of the big changes we made since September was hiring 2 SDRs who can actually be there to work the European hours And we've seen a huge spike in the productivity from that point as well. So I 100% agree with that.
Something that I'll add just from my own example, I think scheduling like emails or Slack messages to an appropriate time is just a way to be considerate. So I work with a lot of our EMEA partners, and an easy thing that I can do is instead of sending it out at 4 p.m. Ontario time and then them getting a ping in the middle of the evening, I just schedule it for, 4 a.m. my time so that they get it first thing the next day. And I think that makes a big difference, just a respect thing too. Last question, and then we'll get into some of these Q&As. What does your closing approach look like? So, what methods are you using? Does it differ between the different places? Would love to hear a few people's take on that.
I think it differs, especially obviously most of my team is based in North America. So Josh knows that a lot of the training that we get in like closing, objection handling, this and that. And then every time I listen to him, I'm like, okay, no, wait, it's different here. And one of the things that like my approach is really just to say, I'm here to work on your timeline when you are ready. Again, adding value, understanding that maybe it's not the right time, or maybe they need more information, or because again, back to Charlotte's point, there is this steeper learning curve in EMEA, especially when it comes to video, for example. It is relatively new to a lot of people in a lot of countries. Just based on the poll we saw today, most people said they're just starting to use video. So this is something that I have to bear in mind, and I can't be pushy, right? I can't be like, you should do this because it's going to work. Do it. Like, I know it's going to work because I've been using video since my days in HubSpot, and I've had great success with it, but most people don't. So it's a matter of not necessarily playing so much on the emotions that this is amazing, buy it because you're going to see great results from it, but more, how can I help you be ready to take that next step and eventually make that buying decision? And I think it's quite different in North America, where people already know the product, obviously in our case, but also there's a lot of emotion involved on, yeah, this sounds great, let's do it, rather than being more cautious and taking their time to make sure they're experts even before like making that buying decision.
Yeah, I completely agree. Again, EMEA piece, that what I found works really well is starting that kind of timeline conversation a lot earlier on in the process around kind of, this is what kind of milestones we have to reach, and this is kind of what research you guys need to do yourselves. This is what you need from me. This is what conversations you need to have internally. Whereas in North America, I feel that you can be a little bit more pushy on that close date, and it doesn't have to have as much lead time into the background as to why and what steps you need to get to it. There is a bit more around, okay, it's end of month, it's end of quarter, we're going to get you a deal here, we're going to do this. That in EMEA, it works to some extent, but nowhere near where as much as it works within the US and kind of that market. I feel like in EMEA, there is a little bit more of a, well, you either want my business or you don't, and kind of I'm not, and it comes back to kind of that not liking salespeople, and it sounds very salesy within EMEA to say, okay, it's end of month, end of quarter, and you need to sign it by this date and do this by that date, and kind of dictate the sales process rather than really understanding what is it that they need to do internally, what can you do to help them get to that point.
And all of that goes back to culture, right? And again, we're saying EMEA as if it was just one country. We have to bear in mind that we're talking about a lot of countries with a lot of different cultures. So if I'm speaking to people in Spain or Portugal, for example, Italy, it's a very different culture. They're more apt for like, oh, let's get a deal in, rather than someone that's in, Benelux or DACH region or Scandinavia. So you really need to understand the culture. What's their buying process, right? What are all their thoughts when they're making a purchase decision? And all these countries are going to have a different way of buying. I've been selling a lot into Israel lately, and that's completely different than all the other countries in Europe mainland, so you really have to bear that in mind, that people just buy differently depending where they're from, depending where they're accustomed to. And as sellers, we need to be chameleons and adapt to that quite quickly. Even how we speak, or the offers that you throw on the table, or whatever else you're doing, you really need to adapt in every single conversation.
And I think that's an important point too. Like the cultures within EMEA are so different and so unique that the way you approach them should be driven by cultural understanding and just respect of how people like to do business there. I would say in North America, like Canada and the US, it's the buying process and what you're able to do is generally the same. Like whether you're selling to somebody in New York versus down south in Texas, like I think the tone of the conversation will be a little bit different, but the way you approach it doesn't really differ. Like people on the West Coast versus people on the East Coast, you can kind of come at it with the same general approach where people, as we kind of said, are just a little bit more receptive to like the presumptive close or like the assumptive close, or just like let's keep things moving, let's move things towards, because we have this date, let's do a workbook plan, right? Whereas in Europe, and I've seen this a lot myself, it's very much let us help you buy, let's help you ask the right questions, let's educate you, and of course, like you say, let's be top of mind. So when they're ready to make the decision, like it's pretty obvious who to go to.
I think like one last thing from my side, I know we're running out of time. One, like the biggest tip, regardless, I've sold into many different regions, face-to-face, online, and different shapes and forms, into even industries. You need to be a trusted advisor. If you can master that, then you're gold. It's just the main thing. You need to be all the listening techniques, focus on that rather than how can I get them to close, and also just become that trusted advisor. And that goes from selling purses. I worked at Louis Vuitton at some point in my life, and you need to be that trusted advisor. And that goes, to selling high-end software. It doesn't matter what you're selling or where you're selling to, build rapport and be a trusted advisor. That's like my personal sort of feeling.
Yeah, I love that. I totally agree. And I think probably everyone on this call does as well. Moving into a few of the audience questions, I know we're coming up on time, but we'll definitely send out a follow-up. And I think we need a part 2 to this. But so I really liked the question around, committees and what are some of the best ways you found to sell around or in those committees? And have you noticed a difference between a buying committee between North America and EMEA?
I can touch on some of the best practices and some of the ways that you want to do it. Basically, think of anything you would do like a long summary email for, or you would try to like set up another call for, like with the buying committee, for example. Like you can respect it. Shows a lot of respect for people's time if you take that kind of communication, condense it into a video. Think about, demo follow-ups. Here's a quick 3-minute video demo of what we talked about. Please share this with your team. And, you focus in, here are the 3 things that you asked for, or that we talked about. Here are the things that are most important to you. Because you have the space and the uninterrupted space in the video and the attention, you could get a lot of that information out. And again, you're not playing broken telephone. This is the video. Here's what we talked about. Here's your use case. Here's why it's important to you. Here's our next steps. Whatever that is, you can consolidate that, put it in a nice video, send it off. Same thing when you're going through anything throughout the sales cycle. Really, you're doing red lines back and forth. Okay, we have this video. Here's the comments I got back from my legal team. Here's where we need some comments from you, or just here's the general explanation of our terms and conditions. Here's our payment terms, whatnot. And things for the buying committee would exactly be that. Demos would be specific walkthroughs of products, would be just recorded videos of the proposals, for example, the terms of service, anything that just facilitates getting that information across. So pretty much, and it's generally good practice to do. I know a lot of you guys are just getting started, but think about any of those meeting follow-ups that you would do. Chances are it's very good that you could turn it into a video or have a video that goes alongside the other communications you're going out.
Yeah.
Just in addition to that, on the kind of committee thing as well, I think it's about understanding each of the roles in that committee as well. Everyone starts kind of a more junior level and is that researcher and is the person trying to find everything out, but having the salesperson respect your time still and respect that you are part of that process. I know I've been in that situation before where I've been new into a role, being really junior, I've been the person that's doing the outreach and not had the same response back from somebody in sales because they don't see you as a decision maker or a buyer. I think that just completely loses that trusted advisor status that Talita was mentioning as well, around how you can then kind of inform the rest of that committee and that how you can be an influencer in that process. So it's understanding each role and not just trying to get to the just get to the decision maker and kind of bypass too many people in that process.
Yeah, and the thing I would add on to that too is it not only depends on the region, but also depends on the organization you're selling to. Because I know I've sold to so many organizations where they want me to present in front of that panel or that community there. I've had a lot of others say, no, like we don't do it that way. My champion has to get the information, present it themselves and things like that. So I feel like when you have the opportunity and actually understand not only how that specific organization works within that region, within everything there, can really help you see what's the best approach. Because obviously the more in person or as close to that as you can be, yeah, the better chance you have, because it leaves less of that room for interpretation. But if you don't have the luxury of being in front of that panel, I highly recommend making your champion's life easy to communicate that value. And the less you can make them play the game of broken telephone, the easier you will have a chance to actually close that deal.
Yep. Big time.
Fabulous. I think let's end off with a question around, for someone who's maybe brand new to video, what tips would you give them in terms of lengths of videos, where they should be using it in their cadence, and maybe kind of the structure of the message to give them kind of that confidence to send out their first video, whether it be in EMEA or North America?
I would say just give it a go as well. I remember when I first started using video, and no one else was doing it at the time at Six and Flow. So we had a shed in our office, which was our kind of podcast shed. And I used to go into the shed and record my videos so that no one else in the office could hear me. I would re-record them 100 times and it would just take me so long. And then I started to see people's response when I was doing them. And we had like a 400% increase of meetings booked from sending videos out versus just text-based emails. So I'd say try it, just go for it, have the confidence. They don't need to be polished. They don't need to be scripted. They don't need to be well rehearsed. It's about the human element of it and showing that you want to help them. You can get your message across, you can get your personality across. You have to worry if you're putting emojis or too many exclamation marks in your email, because it comes across in your voice and in your approach. So my kind of top tips would be kind of don't over script or over rehearse them. Don't watch them back. Once you record it, just press send, let it go, and just, you know that you've got it. You know that you know what you're doing and it's going to be good. And then making sure that you don't keep them too long as well. Nobody's going to watch videos that are minutes and minutes long. Keep it kind of short to the point. And then also introduce in the email how long the video is going to be as well, so you can give people the heads up.
Yeah, and I think some of the biggest things that I would like to echo what Charlotte said, especially just teaching new people and how to use video, is you don't have to be perfect. Because when you're talking to somebody live, we're not perfect. We're all humans. It's okay. And the whole point of using video is to be personal, not to be perfect. So the biggest advice that I've always given is try to be a one-take wonder. It's literally like leaving a voicemail. So we want to be very efficient in what we're saying. And if you have a lot that you're trying to get across, break it up into multiple videos. Because especially when you're looking at an attention span perspective, we've actually found that the longest a video can be is about 3 minutes before you see a huge drop-off rate in attention span. And we've seen it's a lot easier to send 3-minute videos over than 1 10-minute video from an attention span perspective as well. So especially depending on the value you're trying to bring, short and sweet is always better. And from your time management perspective, video doesn't take a long time to do unless you try to do the same video 5 times before you send it. Then you're just making it 5 times longer than it has to be. So try to be a one-take wonder where you can. And as much as you can, try to keep it to 1 to 2 minutes per video, just to make sure that your message is actually getting heard out for what it should be.
And the shorter the video, if you have to do it again, it's easier to record it. How annoying if you were doing a 10-minute video and then you made a mistake on like 9.5 minutes and have to start again. So yeah, keep it short, sweet, and easy to redo.
And don't send a 3-minute video for a prospecting use case. That's way too long. So let's just make that clear. Keep it to like, I would say 50 seconds. It's what you should be aiming. If it gets to 90 seconds, I mean, you can get away with it. But I think, what was it, Josh? Like after 20 seconds, we're not really listening anymore or whatever it is. It's like, you need to give that reason why they should listen to you within the first 20 seconds and just close that, just send it out and close that off in 50 to like 60 seconds, 1 minute maximum. That's like a sweet spot for a prospecting use case.
Aaron has
Awesome.
a quick question in here. Is showcasing your solution video a good or bad idea? I mean, I think
Just wanna
it's
check
a
that
great
out.
idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's again one of those gray areas. It depends, because we also want to make sure that what we're showing is actually relevant to what we're trying to solve. So I think if you have a good understanding of the pain, gain, opportunity, or threat that we are aligning to, then yeah, it's absolutely okay to use like a micro demo, make a quick video from that. My personal favorite is sending it in a follow-up, like I know Rabbi said quite a few times. Where you can make sure you're outlining and showcasing how your solution attaches to certain business outcomes. Because the biggest risk with this sending a video with a solution and you don't know what you're trying to solve is you don't know how the customer is going to react to what you showed. And we still want to make sure as much as we can, we're doing things as live as you can, because how somebody reacts to what you're saying is almost as important as what the solution does. So make sure that you're checking the boxes they need.
That context piece is super key. Just understanding that, and when you're doing a demo or including your product or anything like that, speak specifically to what you're solving or why they engaged you or anything like that, rather than just here's a quick demo, right? Here's all our features. It's not about the features, it's about what the platform, what the product, what the service does for your prospect at the end of the day.
Yeah, but Aaron,
and
I'm
also
a big fan of a follow-up perspective, but I'll let you answer now, Felita.
On that, no, I was just gonna say on that point, if you're already showing your solutions, you're basically saying, I'm here to sell you something. Talk to me because I want to sell you something. So it really goes back to, are you really adding value? No, you're telling them about your solution and that you're about to try to get them to buy something from you. And that's just not the best way to go about it. Rather than, as I think Charlotte mentioned earlier, try to open a conversation. This is sort of what we do. And I think it would be great for your team for this and that reason, because I believe this could be a priority for you or whatever it is that, depending on the segment and the use case there. But don't just, showcase your product and say, please buy it from me, because that's just not what you should be doing in the first outreach.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that Vidyard isn't a tool, or video in general isn't a tool that only needs to be used in prospecting. It can be used throughout the whole sales cycle. So while in your prospecting videos, you might not be showcasing your solution, perhaps if you're a software company, in your demo follow-up, of course, you might include like a 3-minute demo or a micro demo. So different ways that you can use it. And it's not just in those initial touch videos. But with the interest of time, we do need to wrap up. So just a few kind of housekeeping things. We will be sending out the recording as well as announcing the winners of the swag packages and books. So we will send that all in the follow-up email. Definitely want to keep this conversation going. So we'll brainstorm how we can do that together. But thank you everyone so much for attending today. I hope that you learned lots and feel confident being able to sell into different regions and places. I want to thank all the speakers and of course our partners 6 and Flow. Really enjoyed this conversation today.
If anybody has any more in-depth questions, feel free to reach out. I'll speak for myself, but I'm sure everyone feels the same way. Reach out on LinkedIn, send us an email. Always happy to help chat. And hey,
I know,
like you said, Katie, maybe there's a round 2 coming up.
Exactly. I love
Josh,
it.
I pointed David your way already, so he has questions about selling into SMB. So
I love SMB business, so happy to help David.
Big time. I knew Josh was the guy. But yeah, thanks so much for jumping on with us, guys. Really appreciate your time and attention. It was great to be here, and hopefully we can do something again soon.
Awesome. Thanks everyone.
Thanks,
Have a great
everyone.
rest
Bye,
of your
everyone.
Monday.
Take care. Great week.
Bye.